Well, I know that our guest needs no introduction. But I want to say a couple of words about Diane and to thank her for coming this evening. Many of you may not know that when Parsons began its master's program in fashion design and society, it was Diane who was right there at the very beginning, supporting scholarships for students who would be working to transform the industry. And Diane does this across the board in so many ways, whether it's as president of the CFDA, her engagement with schools around the country and around the world. She is among the most generous and influential and deeply caring individuals in this wonderful industry. I can tell you that when you ask Diane for help, she responds immediately, wholeheartedly, and it is just one of the great pleasures of my life as Dean of Parsons to be able to work with such incredible, incredible people. I know, I'm saying nice things tonight. No, it really is extraordinary. And so you know her as a designer, you know her as one of the great lights of this industry, but you should also know that she cares deeply about everything that you're doing and about education. And so when Hazel Clark suggested that we host this event tonight and invite Diane to speak about the wrap dress at 40, I said yes immediately and then tried to make sure it happened, and Diane made it happen immediately as well. So I'm going to very briefly say a couple words about Hazel and then turn the conversation over to these two. And I wanted to thank Hazel, as I said, for the idea to do this event. She is, of course, our research chair of fashion at Parsons and is responsible for generating and promoting research in fashion Parsons-wide, not just in the School of Fashion, but across all of our various programs. And indeed, fashion infuses so much of what we do at Parsons. She's a professor of design studies and fashion studies and teaches in our master's program in fashion studies. She's taught and researched internationally, and her current interests are in fashion, design, and culture in New York and in China. And of course, Hazel was our dean of the School of Art and Design, History, and Theory. And without further ado, it is my great pleasure to turn the evening over to Hazel and Diane Von Furstenberg. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Joel, for the introduction. Welcome, everyone, and particularly welcome to Diane. They've shut the lights down because we're going to celebrate the Journey of Address and 40 years of address first by showing you just a tiny little snippet of the installation in LA. It's really short, so don't blink. So this is just to whet your appetite, and I think it's going to come up now. You can also check that out online. There's a lot online. So Diane, I've got to start with an obvious question. You've probably been asked a million times before, but tell us about the origins of the wrap dress and how it started and how the design evolved.
Okay. The first thing that, if you permit me, that I would like to say to start is that it is 40 years ago that I was a young girl and that I came to New York, and that I designed that dress and lived an American dream. And so when this year was coming up, there was a lot of discussion. Do we celebrate it? Don't we celebrate it? Da da da. And to tell you the truth, even though this dress, I owe everything to this dress, right? It paid all my bills. It paid for my apartment, my house in the country, my children's education, my independence. It made me famous. It made me, I live an American dream. I owe everything to that dress. But like very often, when you are too close to something, you take it for granted. And I always kind of took it for granted. And sometimes even I would resent it, because people would always say, Diane Von Furstenberg, the wrap dress. And I would say, well, okay, but I do other things too. And this year, last year, when we were preparing this, I had a new chairman and a whole new organization in my company, and we sat around the table and debated whether we were going to do an anniversary. And then all of a sudden, I started looking at that dress in a completely different way. And I stopped looking at what it had done to me, which was pay my bills, and I started to think about, you know, how extraordinary that a dress has lived that long. It's never happened, ever, to one dress. And how did that happen? And then, of course, because I'm writing a book right now, which is coming out in November, which is called The Woman I Wanted to Be, I started to think about it and think about it. And then I designed a new dress to celebrate the anniversary of the original one. And that's when I actually remembered a lot of things. So it goes back now to your question. So how did it happen? Okay, first of all, when I was very young, you know, when you're very young, you either have a vocation or you don't. Fashion was not necessarily really something I wanted to do. I didn't really know what I wanted to do, but I knew the kind of woman I wanted to be. That I knew. I wanted to be independent. I wanted to be independent above anything. And my first job was with a photographer's agent, so I got into the world of fashion one way in Paris, and I was very exciting. And then I was invited to go. I had a man I knew in Italy had a factory. He had a printing mill, and he said, you know, you should come and see my organization and work with me. So I went in as an intern, not knowing at all anything. And this man he had a great printing mill. He would print scarves for Ferragamo and Gucci and all of that. So I learned everything about printing. I learned about color, you know, whether it's printed in discharge or in application, the screens, the hand screens, the repeats, how you buy, you know, designs that you see in paper and how you put it in repeat. So I learned all about that. I mean, I just listened to him. And he was screaming always at everybody. And so, you know, I was very embarrassed that he was screaming. And you know, his meeting with the colorists. And at the time, in Italy, you know, in the industrial Italy at the time, in the 70s, it was, you know, people were colorists from generation to generation, you know, all around Como. Como was the center of the silk in Italy. That's where it all came from the Silk Road, and then it landed and it arrived in Venice, and then it ends up in Como. And so you had the whole city of Como was all about silk and weave and printing and everything. So I learned everything about printing. Then next door, he had another factory, which he had bought from a hose manufacturer. And he had bought the walls, and there were still machines to make hose. At the time, there were no pantyhose. I mean, pantyhose was just born, and there were hoses. And he didn't want to throw these machines, so he looked at these machines, and he had the idea of using these tubular knitting machines, and met with, you know, yarn manufacturers from Zia Viscose and DuPont and everything. And he had the idea of knitting in these tubular machines, but thicker yarn. And that's how he came up with these wonderful jersey. Okay? So the print, first factory, the jersey, second factory. And at the time, now it all seems so, I feel like I'm talking about ancient prehistory, but at the time, believe it or not, a T-shirt was a revolution, because T-shirts before that were used by men and mostly sailors. And it's only in Saint-Tropez that they started making T-shirts for women in color and, you know, with a little anchor, and Brigitte Bardot wore them. And so it was the beginning of the T-shirt. So he made these very nice jersey fabric that were really for T-shirts. And he started to print on them, okay? And then, he bought another factory, which was near Florence, where they had great needles. They had very fine needles because they were making intimate apparel, okay? So you could see how it all gels, right? So you have the printing, you have the jersey, you have the intimate apparel kind of whatever. And, okay, and so I am there, you know, a 22-year-old, 21-year-old girl looking at everything and going back and forth and so on. And my boyfriend was in America. He was doing an internship in a bank in New York. And he invited me to come here. And I came here for a month. And I came here, and that's when I saw a completely different fashion than what was in Europe. Because in Europe, you had, in France, it was still maison de couture, you know, the couture houses and everything, and the couturières, the dressmakers all around, you know. And Saint Laurent had just started the first prêt-à-porter shops, Rive Gauche. But it was still very, very new. So that was in France. In England was Ossie Clark and Carnaby Street and the hippies, and, you know, there was a whole other thing. And I came to America, and in America it was completely different, because in America you had 7th Avenue, and 7th Avenue was full of 7th Avenue firms. Some copied from Europe, and some were not. They had designers, but the designers were very anonymous. Nobody knew about them. And there were all these names, but because in America, they had a really big distribution, right? America was very big, it had department stores all over, and so, because of that. But then, a publicist, Eleanor Lambert, thought that she should start promoting the designers of America. And that's the beginning of the CFDA, somehow also linked with me. So, that was that, but that's not when I arrived in New York, there were 2 or 3 designers that absolutely blew my mind. Giorgio Santangelo, Halston, and Stephen Burrows. I mean, that was really exciting and fun and modern and colorful and so new. So it opened my eyes, because my boyfriend was, you know, a social person. I met all these designers, and they would lend me clothes and allow me to go in the back rooms. And so I was absolutely, so when I went back to the factory, I didn't even need a plane to fly. I was so excited of how I could use all my friends, you know, all his infrastructure, and with the idea of doing something maybe on my own, if he would let me. And that's how it all started. So it was a big, long answer.
That's fine. It was a really.
But that didn't explain how I started with a wrap dress. But anyway, so you had the jersey, you had the printed, and so I was there, and I said I was trying to be as discreet as possible, and I started to work with the sample room that was in the 3rd factory, and picking anything I could find on the floor. And we started making little dresses. And meanwhile, to make the story short, I mean, my boyfriend came back, we met, we got engaged, And then I got pregnant earlier than I expected. So I had to get married very quickly, and therefore moved to America. And that's when I said to this Italian man, I am getting married, I am pregnant, I'm moving to America. Can I make a few samples and try to sell them in America? And that's what I did. And my first dresses were T-shirts, T-shirt dresses, shirt dresses, all printed, a couple of tunic with pants, soft, all in jersey. I had a few things that were in jersey, but that was that. And that's how I began. And yeah.
I also am aware that you had a close encounter with Mrs. Vreeland early on in your career.
Oh, that's, yes. So then I came to New York, and I was very intimidated, and I didn't know anything about this. I had one suitcase full of clothes. And I went to see quite a few people. At the time, there were a lot of buying offices. They don't exist anymore because, you know, I mean, at the time you had 1,000 department stores. Now you have 5 because they've all merged. And so I went to see a few buying houses, but they didn't really understand what I was showing them. It was quite different than anything available. Then I went to see Diana Vreeland. Through Egon, I went to meet Diana Vreeland, and so that was very intimidating. I went to the Vogue office, and everything was, you know, all these very glamorous girls, and jewels everywhere, and clothes everywhere. And I got into her office, and I had a rolling rack, so I started to unpack and put everything in rolling racks. And she came in, and she was very, very, very extravagant dragon lady with black lacquered hair and red nail polish and red lip and long, long cigarette holders, because at the time you could smoke. And she came in like that, and the first thing she did is she lifted my chin, and she said, "Chin up, up, up." And I thought, oh. This is not starting well. And she had 2 young girls in the office who then one became Muse of Saint Laurent, Loulou de la Falaise, the other one became a big model. And they started to try my little dresses. And she said, "Oh, this is genius, this is genius, this is great, blah, 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 blah." Big, huge words, and then before I knew, I was off the wall, you know, outside the door with my suitcase, putting things back, and I didn't even know what happened to me. And her assistant at the time, she wasn't, I mean, she was more than an assistant, she was like a fashion editor, Keisha Keeble, she said, "You know, she liked it, so I'm sure she's gonna do something for you." And I said, "What do I do now?" And she said, "Well, soon is Market Week. So the California people who show in New York, all show in the hotel called Gotham Hotel, which is now the Peninsula on Fifth Avenue. And she said, you should take a room there because there will be traffic. You should list yourself in the fashion calendar and make a little announcement in Women's Wear Daily." She said that. And I said, "Can I use your phone?" And I sat at her desk, and I swear it's true. I made a phone call to the hotel. She gave me the date. I booked myself a room. And I did the fashion calendar. Then I went home. I went back, and I asked a friend of mine I asked a friend of mine to take a picture of me. He was a photographer, and he took the picture of me on the cube that was there before, you know, and I took that picture. Then he took then I saw the picture, but I was on the white cube, and the white cube was too white to have a little announcement. So without thinking, I took my pen, my blue fountain pen. I know that because I have the original picture. And I wrote, without thinking, "Feel like a woman, wear a dress." And now, 40 years later, right, That print is more popular than ever. Mrs. Obama chose that dress when she first became First Lady for her Christmas card. And 5 years later, she still wore it a month ago with Kermit on the... So, I mean, so it's so strange. The reason why it's so important to tell you those stories to all of you who are so young, how incredibly important the first juice is, the first encounters, the first opportunities, your first collection. I mean, I assume you're all students. You know, it's really important because what you do at first is very often the essence of what you will do later.
Well, we'll see Mrs. Obama and Kermit later, so that's something to look forward to.
And so I forgot, so I still haven't answered you how I did the runway. So so I'm now doing shirt dresses and t-shirt dresses and blah, blah, blah. I made a little wrap top, like what ballerinas wear, you know, little cache-cœur, we said in French, you know, little, and with a matching skirt. And it became very popular. And it had a big collar and big cuff and a big white belt. And I thought, wow, it was very popular. And so I decided I would turn it into a dress. And it was a little bit challenging because, you know, it was on the bias and I wanted the belt to remain big and whatever. Anyway, so that was the beginning of the wrap dress. And that just went off the wall.
That was great to have that insight. Can you tell us a bit about how the wrap dress fit into the early 70s? I know that in the exhibition, for example, there was a reconstruction of Studio 54. I mean, how the wrap dress was part of
but
life?
you know, the wrap dress was not necessarily the dress you wore at Studio 54. That is really the truth. The wrap dress, what made it so special? I think because it was both proper and sexy. Once somebody told me that that's the dress that the boyfriend liked and her mother and his mother didn't mind. That's one way of seeing it. Another lady from the South told me, oh, I can't do a Southern accent, but she said, I was so happy when I found that dress. I had found a way to be sexy during the day. You know, it was also not expensive. It was really easy. The fabric was different. I mean, wrap dresses have always existed. I mean, you know, from the kimono on. But nobody did it in Jersey, or maybe some people did it in Jersey, but nobody did it in printed Jersey. And so it was, and the prints my prints are always very feline, you know, there's always a movement. So a woman would put it on and she would feel good because she felt protected and there was a collar, and so she felt like that. But the body was, and men liked it, you know, men really like, that's a dress that men remember. And they're easy to take off. And, you know, and it's just, and you can roll it in a ball, and you could wear it at night and come back the next morning. So it was a way to be proper and sexy, and to be a little bit, because it was also the time of, you know, women's liberation and everything. So it was enough of a tailor look because of the cuffs and the collar, but it was soft. So it was just, I guess it was right.
Well, it probably must have been right, because it's also become a movie star in its own right. I mean, it appeared on Sybil Shepherd in Taxi Driver, and then, of course, recently on Amy Adams in American Hustle.
And every time, the funny thing about, I mean, everybody's dressed. I mean, all designers get dresses in movies, but what is different about, I mean, what is special about the dress is that the dress becomes a character. Like in Almodovar's movie Under Your Skin, it's she becomes, he does all these Banderas does all these operations, and it transforms a man into a woman, and that's the dress that he gives it to her. And when I told Almodovar, I said, "Oh, I was so flattered that you took my dress," he said to me, "Oh, that wasn't an accident, because your dress is a symbol for me of a woman." And lately, American Hustle, did you see that? American Hustle? Also, when she meets him and he has a dry cleaning, and she gets the dress, and all of a sudden, boom, she gets powerful with the wrap dress. And there again, David O. Russell said, the dress was a character in the movie. It was not just a dress on a gown. So, I feel at this point that I am much less important than the dress, and I was just a way for the dress to be.
And yet the dress hasn't had a completely sort of smooth history. I mean, it went into a bit of a hiatus.
Yes, I sold the company, and then I sold my company at a time that it was dynasty, with the big shoulders and very structured and the big hairdo and everything. And so at that time, I wasn't in charge of my company anyway, so they stopped making them. And so they stopped completely. And then about 14 years ago, when I started the reason I started my company again is that I started to see that hip girls were buying the old dresses in vintage shops. And then one, and then another one, and then the new young designers were doing things like that, and homage to DVF and Diane Von Furstenberg and things. So I thought, oh, and so that's when I started again.
In the exhibition, there are a lot of photographs of famous women who've worn the dress. You mentioned Mrs. Obama, but can you tell us a bit more about some of the other people? We'll see the images.
Oh my God! So one of the things that I have, if you are interested, if you want to tell your own story about the wrap dress, you can go online and what is it? Wrapstory@dvf.com. Okay, you go on wrapstory@dvf.com, and you could register and put your picture or your mother's picture or your grandmother's picture, and tell the story. And there are many, many, many wrap stories. The most fun recent one that I just learned about 2 months ago is I was doing an event with the actress Anne Hathaway, and I saw her before that, and so she introduced me to her mother. And her mother's a famous producer, and her mother said, "I'm going to tell you something that she doesn't know." And I said, "What?" She said, "I seduced her father in one of your dress." Which really could mean that Anne Hathaway was conceived in a wrap dress. Okay, so that's one. I mean, I have hundreds of those. I mean, everybody has a story. But the famous people, Ingrid Betancourt, I don't know if you know. Ingrid Betancourt was an activist politician in Colombia, and she was kidnapped for 7 years in the jungle. And in France, she was a big deal, so I knew about her. Anyway, whatever. I ended up meeting her much later when she was liberated. And then she told me that after she was liberated, after 7 years in the jungle, the first dress she bought was a DVF wrap dress. And it was funny, because all the time she was in the jungle, she had a camouflage, military suit. And she bought a red camouflage DVF wrap dress.
That's a nice story. So just to get back to the exhibition, it's already visited Moscow and Sao Paulo and Beijing. Were there different reactions in the different cities?
But you know, the reason I did these exhibitions abroad first is I was opening a shop in Moscow, and my friend, the model Natalia Valdionova, said, "What are you going to do?" I said, "Will you come to Moscow with me?" And she says, "Yes, but what will you do?" And I said, "Well, I guess I will have a fashion show, and I will have I will speak at university or whatever." She said, "You know, us in Russia during these 70s, it was a very different world. So we would Russian women would love to see pictures of Andy Warhol and this and that." And so she gave me the idea originally to do the first exhibition. And so it was about everything, you know, then we did another one in Sao Paulo, then we did it in China, and I had incorporated a lot of art and fashion because I had known the artists, and a lot of the artists had painted me, like Warhol and so on. And then in China, I also introduced some Chinese artists. But in LA was different. In LA was really the journey of a dress, because this entire thing, they're all wrap dresses. The army, all this, they're only wrap dresses. Some new ones, some old ones, some long ones, some this, but all wrap dresses. And this exhibition I just closed last week in LA it was called, the others too, but it was called The Journey of a Dress, and it was all about the dress. And because I felt like it was time to honor her.
Sure, everyone in the audience would love to know if the show's going to come to New York and when.
I don't know. I mean, it was so extraordinary to have. I had such a big space, and it was so incredible. I don't know. It was huge space. Oh, you asked about Studio 54. So it was a huge space. I went to see my friend who runs LACMA, the museum, Los Angeles, of contemporary modern art. And I said, "I would love to do this exhibition in LA. Do you know a place nearby, maybe?" And he said, "Maybe." And then on the LACMA campus, there was an old department store called May Company, which LACMA used as its storage. But they would have to remove the storage, because soon they're going to do all the restoration, and it's going to become the museum of the Film Academy, the Oscar. And so I just happened to be there at the right time, and I kind of sneaked myself in, and then I looked at the space, and it was so huge. And so then I built this, it's like I built a museum for just this exhibition. And so that's why it's so grand and big and beautiful. And 2 months before, I went on site, and we were talking about the party, the opening party, and they were planning to do a party in the tent in the parking lot. And I said, "I don't want to have a party in a tent in a parking lot." I said, "The party should be in here, but of course it couldn't be in the exhibition." And then I found a space in the back, I mean, big space, almost 4,000 square feet. I said, "Let's turn this into a nightclub, and let's make this the Studio 54. So,
sounds great. We should open the floor to some questions, but before we do, I mean, your other major role that we know you for is, of course, as president of the CFDA, and I wondered in that role, and bearing in mind we have a lot of students present, if there's kind of 3 key takeaways for students you'd like to share as CFDA president.
Okay. The first thing is that you have to, the first thing I will tell you is that you have to be serious, because you have to be serious at the base in order to have fun on the top. The second thing I will tell you is that you should try to get, when you know more or less what your style is, or what you like, or what you identify with, you should try to get internship, because you learn so much from internship. And after that, you should make sure that what you want to do makes sense, and then just go for it. Go for it. But also in the business of fashion, there's so many things. There's not just design. I mean, you have design and merchandising and marketing and retail and website. I mean, there's just so much that if you like fashion, visuals that you could be involved in. So I think you have to find your, you have to find the place where you will be the most satisfied and where you will have the most to offer. That's what I think.
That's great advice. And I think it's also great the way you were talking about internship being so important to your own career.
Very important. I was an intern, and I took everything from that man. Everything. I still live off that man.
So I think there will be some questions, and we have 2 microphones at the front if people would just like to come to the front to ask their questions. And while we're doing that, we're going to show images of the journey of a dress behind us here. I also wondered if there's anybody in the audience wearing wrap dress.
Many. Many. Ask them to get up. There's many of them.
Absolutely. That's the next thing. Would you like to stand up and show us your wrap dresses?
Yeah, yeah. That's okay. You can get up too. Right. Look how cute and young and pretty and sexy they are.
Great. So if anyone's got any questions, would you like to come up to the front?
You got to be young to wear a wrap dress. That's the thing.
Okay, here's your first question, Diane.
Hello, can you hear me? Thank you so much for the insight. I really appreciate you coming out and taking the time to speak with us. I have your book here by Untitled. So first thing is, can I get an autograph? That's the first thing. Second thing is, I did hear on Women's Wear Daily that you were starting a show on E! And I want to know how can I apply for that or become a part of it, or...
What do you do?
I'm a fashion design major, Parsons here.
Okay.
So.
No, I think I am actually going to do a show on E! And it's a very interesting experience for me too. Because I believe very much in that first door. You know those doors when you are your age? And there are all these doors, and people you meet, and all of that. And I really feel strongly that it is important to open all the doors that you can. You just did it, right? You say, oh, I heard you in the show. Can I apply? You know? Well, you can't, but nevertheless. But that's not the point. But you know, and I really want to encourage that. And I mean, I didn't mean to say it badly, but I mean that the girls have already been selected. That will be on the show. Okay. But there'll be other years.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And I will sign for you.
Okay.
There's another question on this, Diane, on the left side.
Why don't you? Oh, later, okay. Oh, sorry.
Yes, we're hopping from side to side.
Hi, Hazel. Hi, Diane. I just want to say you've been a true inspiration for me going into the fashion industry and all of that. But my question, because you've been around since the 70s and you've seen so much sort of evolution in fashion publicity and advertising and coverage, and there's been a lot of criticism of social media in the fashion world, especially at fashion shows, in terms of people taking Instagram pictures or Vine videos instead of actually appreciating the clothing. But you've totally embraced that. I follow you on Instagram and Twitter and all that fun stuff. I'm just wondering what your thoughts on that are, and if it is ruining the art of fashion publicity or the fashion show, or, you know, whatever you see fit.
Okay, all right. So I will tell you that I was lucky that I'm old enough to have danced at Studio 54, and young enough to have embraced the digital revolution. I love it. I mean, I'm addicted. I sleep with my iPad. I mean, I'm really, I just find it so extraordinary. Sure, there's some irritating things, and sure that people don't live in the present because they're closer to the person they're texting to, and blah, 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 blah. But it's just so extraordinary. You know, all of the, you know, it's very democratic, you know. I mean, that I can shoot out and, you know, I don't know. I love it. I don't know where it goes, but I completely embrace it, and I find it fascinating, and I find it exciting, and that's it.
I think the next question.
Hi. You spoke about the evolution of the wrap dress, and you said at one point how you had other styles that you wanted others to take notice. So how has your style evolved over the years since the wrap dress, and how do you identify yourself now compared to how it was later? Okay, well, actually what I realized is that the wrap dress is still here. And so much is still here, because you see, what I did, this is a very interesting thing. When I decided I was going to do the whole exhibition on the wrap dress, if I had done it from my archives, or anybody in my company, it probably would have looked like a bunch of old dresses. So I wanted somebody fresh to curate it. And I met this designer in England, and we really connected, and he had just left his present job, you know, the job he was having. He was creative director of Bali, and I had said, oh, I would love to do a project with you. And by the time I came back here, I said, I am going to ask him to curate. So he spent days, weeks into the archives, and all I knew is that I wanted to do an army of dresses. New dresses, current dresses, old dresses. And I told him, you are also allowed to recreate some of the prints. I have a huge archive of 15,000 prints. You are allowed to recreate, change scale, do whatever you want, make new dresses in order to create, you know, make a point of what you're curating. And that's what he did. And he did such a good job that he's now running all of my studio. And and he made me realize how fresh the dress is, you know? So it's not, but we have a full collection. And so what is the DVF style? It's effortless, sexy, on the go, okay? It is solution-driven. It's the friend of the woman. You wake up in the morning, your eyes are swollen, you have to do this, you don't know what to do. DVF, you know, that kind of thing. Simple, always simple, sophisticated, you know, beautiful, you know, becoming. So effortless, it must be effortless. It must be sexy some way. And it must be, and if you can't put it in your suit, in a little bag, it's not on brand. So. Okay, thank you.
That's great. I think the next one was over here.
I am wearing DVF. It's not a wrap dress, but it's my favorite.
But it is that dress is called Ginny, and I noticed that the young girls love that dress because of the flare skirt. So, to celebrate the anniversary of the wrap dress, I took that dress and I went to this young girl that I work with, and I said, let's make a wrap dress with that skirt. And we created a dress called Emilia that has a little wrap top that's like a ballerina, and a woven skirt that is care. So
it's fantastic. My question to you is, as a designer, and I think many designers that are up and coming and new into the industry, there's a lot of challenges along the way. And for you, on your road to success, I want to know, was there a particular major challenge that happened to you in your career where you faced a point, I guess, at which where you didn't know if you would be able to continue to
How
go
about
on?
How about 3 years ago? I mean, the thing is that the challenges, even when you're successful, that's why I wrote the book that is coming out in November, is because, as you know, my business career was three phase. American dream, okay? Young girl, doesn't know what she's doing, lives an American dream. Great, wonderful. Second time, years later, comeback kid, again. I came back because I saw that the women were the... And now it's legacy, right? Now I realize that I have a heritage, I have 40 years in the back of me, a dress is still relevant, blah, 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 blah. Now is the new challenge. So the point is that the challenges are, as you evolve, the challenges, you encounter challenges all the time, because you live in a competitive world, because sometimes, I mean, there's endless. And how do you deal with the challenges? You try to stay as close to the truth as possible, which means true to yourself, but also true to who you are in the marketplace. So no delusion, you know? But it never gets easy. I mean, it doesn't matter how successful you are. But it's fun.
Thank you.
Next one.
I love your necklace.
It's gorgeous.
Thank you. It goes.
Yeah, it's very nice.
Hi, so yeah, you're obviously a huge inspiration to women everywhere, and I know that your brand has a huge relationship with women and vice versa. And I wanted to know what you thought of the role of women in society over the last 40 years, and how does the wrap dress reflect that?
Oh my God, I'm very committed. You know, I was very lucky to empower myself, right? I became the woman I wanted to be, and I am really blessed and happy for that. But it is my duty and my desire to, however I can, to always empower women. I do it by making them look good, but I also do it in philanthropy and everything like that. The place of women and the role of women in society is still very much of a struggle. I mean, you know, what is happening right now in Nigeria is just unbearable. And the idea that, you know, to kidnap girls from school, I mean, it's just awful. So we have a lot of work to do. But we are half of the planet, and we are strong. Sometimes we forget to show our strength, so I think it's important to be very, you know, supportive of one another.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oops, am I close enough now? My wrap dresses are older than most of the students, and I love them, and they're still my husband's favorite dresses. Can you speak a little bit about...
And how many children did you have?
None, by very careful choice. Thanks in no small part to the dress. Can you speak a little bit to print design? Because that's part of what I find iconic about your dresses.
Yes, and that is really my strength. I mean,
I love them.
I never thought this would happen, you know, and but print for me is everywhere. I mean, now I have aging spot. I say I have a printed dress, legs. Print is everywhere, and I always have my camera, and I take close-up of everything in nature. I'm a hiker. You know, I take pictures of bark, I take pictures of leaves, I take pictures of everything, and they become prints. It's all there. It's all in nature. And the movement of it, and the color. We have huge archives, and that also, for the longest time, I didn't pay attention to it. You know, I took it for granted, but now we are really kind of curating it, and it's fun. It's fun, and a great print remains a great print forever.
As a quick follow-up, do you have favorite prints from over the years? Does anything stand out?
I do, and they end up being very much, yes, I do. But sometimes they're new, and sometimes they're old. But I know them all by heart. I mean, nobody can fake me and say, oh, this was your print, and it's not, even if it's 15,000 of them. Yeah. No, that turned out to be my real training.
Thank you.
Are you a print designer?
I'm a photographer. I photograph
Oh.
old people.
Oh,
So I
old
see,
people.
I see print all the time.
That's right. That's
Yeah.
right.
It's just
That's
a different
right.
fingerprint.
Maybe you send me a picture. I'll make an old wrinkled print.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
They will never know. Nobody will ever know but you and I.
It's a very careful secret.
So we'll just take the questions from the people that are standing now.
I'm
because-
sorry, my answers are too long.
No, that's fine. That's fine.
Thank you so much. It's just an absolute pleasure to listen to this conversation. I feel like I'm sitting across the table from you having a glass of wine. I'm the co-founder of an ethical fashion startup, and I think your dress is partially so iconic because it has such value. People keep it for generations. They hand it down to their daughters. And in the work I'm doing, we're trying to understand how can we move this industry kind of backwards almost to where people value their clothing more and really take pride in what they choose rather than going in this cycle of fast fashion.
I know.
So I'd love to hear what your thoughts are on that.
It's funny because it's funny, that's what I say. You know, my dresses, I mean, they sell on eBay years later at the same price or more expensive, you know, so in a way, but because I insist on the quality of the fabric. I mean, it is a big issue. It is a big issue because, oh God, fashion is this huge. I think somebody told me this number, that 25% of the world's population is involved in the business of fashion, of making clothes or things like, oh, you know, whatever. So it's a big industry. It gives a lot of work, and then there is so much waste. So, but the conscious is coming up because of people like you and because of what you do. It's coming up, and even at the CFDA we're beginning to. So you keep on doing what you're doing because I think it's important. I mean, look in Africa. I mean, they recycle, you know,
plastic bottles.
Yes, and they make amazing things. So I think it's absolutely important.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
I was so struck when you just said that you find inspiration in nature and you carry around a camera, because one of my favorite pool cover-ups that I have by you is I was at the aquarium with my family and I was looking at this exotic fish and it was yellow and white and black, and I said to my husband, look, that looks like my pool cover-up, and he like looked at me, but it was just so gorgeous. So I do see so much nature in your prints. But my question is this. You know, by the time a designer reaches a certain level of popularity, and they've been around for years and years, there's bound to be, you know, other designers and stores that, I guess we could say, take inspiration from, you know, the designs. And I wonder, is that flattering for you, or is it frustrating when you see so many places doing the wrap dress and prints that look like yours? And
you know, it's a form of flattery, right? I mean, you can't go on. It's you just have to get going. I mean, it's I mean, the people copy you when you're popular.
Okay.
So I don't. You just have to be better.
Take it in stride.
Thank you. You look very stylish too. Thank you. A lot of stylish people here with your DVF wrap iPad.
Oh
cover.
yeah. I have questions. One, aside from the wrap dress, what's another favorite silhouette of yours? And two, what are your rules when you're print mixing?
My favorite silhouette is I like the body, you know, and I like the legs and I like the body, but I also like pants. But I like when the woman can really feel free in her movements. I mean, I appreciate very structured clothes, but I can't wear. I mean, I don't like them, but I appreciate them. Okay, so what else? The second question, mixing the prints. You know, there's a lot of layers in designing prints and mixing them together, and there's a lot of work that you will never see, that you don't even know. But because how they were created, and maybe it all started from this, and then it got blown up, and then it got this, and the blown up, that line was repeated, and so on. So very often you create them to mix, and you say they have nothing to do with each other, but actually they do.
Okay. Thank you.
Hi, thank you so much for being here. I don't know if you have read it yourself. I'm sure you've heard about it. The Boston Consulting Group did a study very recently for the business of fashion about the career situation in the fashion world. And one of the statistics that I found amazing, I'm sure a lot of people in this room agree, 65% of the companies say that they're really unhappy with the pool of talent coming up for the top executives. So, as a woman who is so in control of your company now,
Well, it's a good point, because right now one of the major things that we are working with at the CFDA is really to cross the bridge between the schools and the designers. So but we also use the Boston Group, so that has something to do with it. But so you're absolutely right. We realize that, for example, designers are looking for great pattern makers, but pattern makers maybe doesn't sound that glamorous. But so we are going to do that. We are really playing a major role in creating bridges between the schools.
But just as an aside, I worked with the CFDA for 2 years with my NYU MBA program, and we're trying to build a bridge between Parsons and the business school there to get the creative and the business side.
That's right.
So obviously we would love
Listen,
to help
you are all, I know that you all think that it's very competitive right now, but we didn't have any of that when I was young, so I think if there's multitude of places that you can go, and it's not just design. There's so many other great careers.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
It's interesting that you just said that, because this was a gift from my son for me to come here for Mother's Day. For 2 years, I had bought used wrap dresses from vintage stores for years before. And 2 years ago, before my son came to Parsons, I said, I'm going to buy a brand new DVF dress, and I'm going to put it on the wall. This is my empty nester dress. And I bought it in a size 8, even though the lady tried to talk me into getting a 14. And I was like, no, I'm going to get an 8. And I hung it on my wall in my room on the closet door. For 2 years, I was like, I'm going to get in that dress before you graduate. So I wore it to his graduation. So this was and I turned 40 when the dress turned 40. So this was my gift from him. But I actually do strategic partnerships, marketing, and PR for fashion. So it's interesting, her comment, because I was happy to hear you say there are so many other avenues of fashion that you can get into. And if you're looking at the images up here, you'll see her dresses in Salem ads and all different types of ads. There's strategic partnering, there's marketing, there's PR, and we're always looking for people who are interested in that avenue. And it's not easy. So it's a little less competitive area. It's just as exciting. You get to speak to people, you get to team people up, come up with great ideas, include fashion in ads. So you guys should think about that.
Absolutely. And your son,
my son
will be, your son?
My son, yes.
Your son will be telling his daughter, that's the dress that my mother wore at my graduation, and so you could wear it for your graduation. How about that?
Exactly.
I won't be there, but...
Thank you so much.
Hello, Diane. Thank you so much for being here. I wanted to ask you, as a young designer, kind of graduating from college, how do you think, just as we kind of transition, how do you deal with critiques? Like when you first started, I know we all have our own identity, and it's very personal to us. So when someone critiques your work, you almost feel like they're like shooting you in the chest. How did you deal with that when you first started?
Well, that's another reason why you should always be true to yourself.
Yeah.
Because if you try to be somebody else, which happens to all of us all the time, if you try to do something like somebody else and you get critiqued, then you say, shit, but that's not really me. But if they critique you for something that you are, it's okay.
I see. Okay.
So my big advice to all of you is, the most important relationship in life is the one you have with yourself.
Thank you.
We can't follow that. Thank you so much for coming, and thank you very much, Diane Von Furstenberg.
Thank you.